Hello and welcome to the second video looking at Orc pirates in Battlefleet Gothic Armada. So in this video we're going to go over the upgrades, skills, favours and crew available to the Orks. So let's jump straight into it with the upgrades. So you'll notice that they're split into 5 categories: engine, generator, deck, hull and weaponry. So weaponry, deck, generator and engine represent the 4 subsystems which can be targeted independently inside of the actual battles, with hull obviously just being your straight up hit points. This means that for deck, generator and engine, generally speaking, disabling that particular subsystem will disable the upgrades. Weaponry, obviously it has to be specific, so here we're looking at a cruiser. It has 3 weapons in total, 1 on each side and the nose. They each have to be taken out separately to fully disable the weapons. Right, so let's look at our upgrades. Engine, mech boy tuned engines. As it says there, if the ship suffers critical damage on the engine, its speed penalty is divided by 2. So usually you would lose about half your speed, so now you're only going to lose a quarter. This obviously has some use to Orcs as they are relatively slow to start with, so taking that engine critical damage and losing speed makes them really slow. So that is something to consider. Turbo booster. Give plus 25 speed to the ship, so now we can look at going, okay cool, we can make them faster. But every time you use that big red button, it does have a 20% chance to suffer a temporary engine critical damage. So temporary is not so bad, because when you activate your repair system, that will repair them, but that does have a cooldown. So obviously using it all correctly, you want to make sure you know what you're doing there. Saying that, it's only a 20% chance, so it's not too bad. Grot tuned thrusters. Rotation speed of the ship is improved by 5 degrees per second. Again, Orc ships are quite slow to turn, and as they do tend to like ramming, it is something that's quite useful for them. This can be something to help you with lining up the ships properly. Also, they all have nose mounted weaponry, so again, having that ability to turn quickly to get that in line with an enemy is useful. Lots of thrusters, so straight up combustion gauge, 25% extra. It's just going to run longer. Semi-useful, something to keep in mind though, that big red button, once it's pushed, you can't unpush it. It will go until it's empty, so can be a bit of a double-edged sword with this upgrade. Generators. What do we got here? We got Gork Blessed Pilots, so asteroid damage to the ship is negated. Can be useful, depends on the map. That's why I'm always a bit iffy about taking this on my line ships. I don't mind taking it on my transports, because that way I don't have to worry about asteroids there. I can just send them straight through, and this can actually be useful if I'm dragging the enemy ships through with me. But on line ships I'm always a bit iffy about doing it. There's just better upgrades if you ask me, especially as the asteroid fields won't necessarily do that much damage, and they're not that hard to avoid. Mech Boy Custom Void Shields. 50% increased reload speed for your shields. This is useful. Kind of. So with most other races, I do tend to recommend this, especially if you're going to go with the upgraded shield capacity, the extra shields here. It's a good combo. You increase the amount you have and you increase the recharge rate. But with Orcs, you don't actually rely on the shields that much for your health. They actually have really high hull, so yeah, something to consider there. We just talked about that, but just a longer look. 100 points for your line ships, 50 points for your escort ships to the shields. Right, then we have Bonkers Big Mech. So if destroyed, the ship always triggers a plasma energy surge that deals double damage. So when you're ships blow up, there's always a chance for them to have a plasma energy surge, but this just makes it guaranteed, and it doubles the damage. Kind of an interesting choice, this one, because obviously it's relying on your ship blowing up. But in saying that, Ork ships do tend to like to be close, so you are likely to catch opponents with it. And especially these lighter ships, they're the ones most likely to die, obviously. And against some of the weaker opponents, Eldar in particular, who also like to be close, or at least tend to end up being close to you a lot of the time, you can take out their ships like this. It's not the worst thing in the world, but just keep in mind you are more or less relying on your ship being blown up. Right, on the deck we have Chain Squig, unlocks the Chain Squig crew member, so we will look at that soon. Weird Boy Tower, so we add a Zap cannon to the deck with a range of 3,000 units. And then each crew point spent in the Weird Boy crew member adds 3,000 to the range. But any Zap upgrades you have, which we'll get to when we talk through the weaponry, will not affect it. And we'll talk about the Weird Boy crew member when we get there. Another bridge. So essentially this just means you can lose your bridge and still be able to use special orders. You'll still suffer the other penalties for losing your bridge, which includes reduced sight range and lower morale, but you will still be able to use your special orders. Grot messengers. So this just increases the duration of your special orders for lock-on, brace for impact, and reload. Can be quite useful. 50% extra on these is quite a bit considering what they do for you, so it's one of the stronger upgrades out there. Hull, belt armor. Love this upgrade. It essentially goes, cool, first permanent critical damage inflicted to a system. So keep in mind permanent, not the temporary. The temporaries will still happen, but the first permanent, ignored. Quite useful. Extra turrets. It's only 3 of them. You gotta weigh it up. I personally don't think it's worth taking this over other upgrades, but you might find you're facing a lot of opponents that use a lot of ordnance or torps, and maybe you feel you need that extra defense. Fire safety grots. 50% shorter time on fires. Quite useful. Less hull damage. You may not feel the need to use the actual repair to stop them. Saying that, if I had multiple going, I'd still probably consider doing it. Clever Mech Boy. So this is quite an interesting upgrade. So as it says there, if heavily damaged, so usually when you get the heavily damaged you can't use boarding action or emergency repairs, this lets you keep doing it. But you can't repair above 50% of your maximum hull. In saying that, as I mentioned earlier, Orks have quite a high hull, so it's not that bad. Like 15% can actually be still quite a lot when compared to other races. But yeah, hopefully you just don't get there. So something to keep in mind. Right, squadrons refueling station. Cooldown of your squadrons diminished by 20%. If you're gonna go squadrons, I always recommend this upgrade, simply because it means that you are going to get your damage out better. It increases your DPS essentially. Grot gunners. So above 6k distance, the accuracy loss on guns is reduced by 50%. Realistically for Orks, you really don't want to be at range. None of your weapons start with a range above 6k apart from zaps, and they always hit anyhow. So I just find this particular upgrade on Orks pointless, as they're not a long range. They never have been, and I doubt very seriously that they will become so in the future. Mordaka. This, on the other hand, much more useful. So while using the lock-on special order, all guns always fire the maximum number of shots. just in case you haven't watched the first video where I go over this stuff, Ork guns have a chance to either lower the amount of shots they have by 50% or increase by 50%. This just means they'll always fire the maximum number. That means they'll always actually be firing with that plus 50% while the lock-on is active. So this could mean you're putting out quite a large amount of damage. And obviously if you go that with the increased duration for your special order, yeah, can be serious. Right, Disruptor Zap. So you hit the hull, their speed is reduced by 50% for 2 seconds, and it stacks. So this obviously is quite useful for Orks, as I've mentioned previously, they are slow. So this can allow them to catch up to those faster enemies. So and you do they want to be ramming a bit, so it does make it a bit harder for them to get out of the way of that. So quite a useful upgrade. Shootier Lancers. Yep, we're just going to increase the range of all zap on the ship by 3,000. Now remember that won't include the Weird Boy one if you have that equipped. Shield Breaker Shot. The ship's zaps have a 50% chance to bypass shields and hollow fields. So you combine this with the Disruptor Zap upgrade and you should be slowing down the enemy quite a bit, especially if, like me, you go zap heavy on your ships. There's a lot of zap coming out. You should be hitting them fairly regularly with it, and with them stacking, all's better. Really big guns. So here's where we can increase the range of all guns on the ship by 3,000, which would make that at least semi-useful. But I still wouldn't bother because realistically I don't see the point with Orks. And more teleporters. So we get an additional assault action out of Lightning Strike. Normally only has one, now we'll have two, so awesome. Orks are particularly good at boarding, so this isn't necessarily the worst upgrade to take. Right, so that's all the upgrades. Let's go and have a look at the skills. So these are broken down again into subsections. We have defense, damage control, support, recon, and maneuver. So this can allow you to specialize your ships. Yeah, with the light cruisers, you're only going to choose one anyhow, but anything above is getting two, so something to keep in mind. Right, so defense here, we have overload shields. Shields become impenetrable for 10 seconds. Can be useful to stop large amounts of incoming damage. Other than that, you know, it's only semi-useful, and we don't have the cooldown there. It's the same as the other races, so if you want to check out the other videos, it'll all be there. Mech Boy Capacitor. Increase regeneration rate of the shields by 150%, so this is quite large. And that 10 seconds with 150%, you can pretty much regen all your shields in that time. Especially if you have put on the shield regen upgrade to boot. That's essentially a 200% increase to your base shields. It's awesome. Right, what do we got for damage? We have our Disruption Bomb. So it depletes shields, that's what it does. Does have a delay there of 10 seconds. Does mean enemy ships can get out of the way, but there are ways of making that more difficult. Against the AI, they don't even tend to particularly try it, even against human opponents, so there are ways of making them sort of choose the lesser of two evils sometimes. So we have that, and then we have the Plasma Bomb. So this one actually does damage. So as it says there, it's 100 damage to all ships within 750 units, and 50 to all the ships within 750 to 1500. So if you do see one of these pop out towards the edge, it's not too bad, especially if your shields are still up. If your shields are still up, they will absorb all of this. So you really want to either Use this on opponents that have had their shields already taken down, possibly with the disruption bomb. So as you can see, they are sort of meant to be used in combo. Right, over in control. So we're going to actually have a look at this one first, because this is the stasis bomb. So it's an 86% slow down effect on anything inside of it, with the exception of lance/zap weapons, but everything else, so ships, ordnance, all your gun projectiles, your torps, all of that, slowed down by 86%. So it has a 15-second delay, but it does have a larger radius. That's why it's got the longer delay. But if you can get a ship trapped in this, and then combo off with both of your bombs, plus shooting at them with lances, because it ignores the disruption effect, you can actually take out ships in the 15-second duration that you have, especially if you manage to catch a bunch of escort ships, because they're taking more damage from the plasma bomb. Right, control. Still, we have here the Ork songs. Yeah, I'm not actually called why it's called songs, but it disrupts the detection range, or reduces it to 1,000 for a short time. Trust me, that 25 seconds can feel like a long time when you're the one under the effects. And 1,000 range is nothing. You pretty much have to be on top of the other ship to see it. So these can be quite useful. I'm always a bit iffy about how useful with Orks, as like I said, Orks tend to like to be close, and that includes ramming, and that does mean they're on top of the ship, but still something to look at. Wag! So, because we had to have it in here somewhere with Orks, we have a Wag ability. As it says there, this ship and all within range, so 6,000, pretty decent, gain a free additional assault action every time they board an enemy ship. So it only does affect boardings, not all assault actions, so only boardings, so something to keep in mind. Right, and then rally. Very useful to have somewhere in your fleet with Orks, because they have the lowest morale in the game, and it's really not hard to trigger Cascade Flee with them. And once you start executing all your captains and copying the negatives that come from doing that, it's not particularly good for an Ork fleet. So yeah, I would recommend having this possibly too in your fleet somewhere. Recon. Rot on a rock, because probably is exactly what this is. So as it says there, it deploys a stationary grot in a sealed capsule that has a detection range of 2,500 units. So this really has two uses, because you can attach it to ships as long as their shield's been taken down. So if ships are pulling range and using silent running on you, chucking this on it makes that pointless. And a 3-minute cooldown should give you more than enough time to blow them up. Or if they're hiding inside of a gas field, or asteroids if they're doing that. Place this in the middle and you will cover the vast majority of asteroid and gas belts out there, and they can't hide in there anymore. So that's its two big uses. Grot Rocket Nosy. So pretty simple. Send a probe, goes in a straight line at that speed of 600 and reveals everything inside of its radius. Yeah, and while it doesn't have quite the flavour like this one did, I can imagine it probably is just a grot in a rocket reporting back. Maneuver, good old micro warp jump. So this can be actually quite useful with Orks, especially on the larger ships, because you can very quickly and easily get something within that ramming angle and range, and the enemy's not going to have time to react. You chuck this, they're there, you're next to them, you hit that red button, they're gone. So it can be quite useful with them. but as it does say there, it does share a cooldown with disengagement. So that means it starts on cooldown, and also means that if you use this, you're not running for another 3 minutes. So something to keep in mind. If you're low on health and you're like, oh, I might need to run this ship, don't use this ability. Grot Assistance. Cool. Again, with Orks, not necessarily the worst upgrade. You burn through that big red button and bang, you've automatically got it refilled and can go straight again. So, maneuver is not the worst thing in the world to help the Orks out, especially with their ramming preference. Right, so that's all the skills. Let's have a look at the Favours. So as you can see, the Favours are based around different Ork clans. So we have the Evil Sons clans. Just a note, the fitting price goes up as your ships get bigger. So 200 for light cruisers all the way up to 1600 for your battleship. And it just essentially doubles each class. So what do we get out of it? We get a tractor cannon. Yep, pretty much what you'd expect. It's tractor beam, it grabs the ship and pulls it towards you. Again, quite useful for Orks, as this can help get enemy ships that are running away back within range, or ramming range, which, let's face it, is pretty much what we want to do. And a bigger red button, so it increases your refill rate by 25%. So this is all about helping you keep that enemy in range, either by bringing him to you or increasing that refill rate so you can just use it more often. Right, Blood Axe clans. Nova Cannon. So, yeah, pretty much does everything the Imperial one does. Just it's only available through an upgrade like this, which does technically mean you can have it on all of your Ork ships if you really wanted to. The only problem is, well, it's the same as a Nova Cannon. It's not going to always hit. And as it says there, it does have a 25% chance to explode on each use and suffer a permanent critical damage. So, yeah. Not only is it not necessarily going to always hit, it's got a chance of exploding. So anyhow. And commando training. So if you really do want running silent on your Ork ships, this is the way to go, because this is the only way to get it. Personally, I don't feel it's necessary, but hey, if you really want it, there it is. The Goth clan. So, ramming gob. So obviously the gob would be your front here. Increases damage dealt by ramming by 50%. Just useful. And Raging Goths, so your assault actions when boarding, one additional assault action when boarding. So you can end up with a lot of assault actions with Orks. So you warg, you have this, and then you board, and you're getting 4 assault actions. That's a lot. And Orks are quite strong in their troop value, so you could be doing quite a fair bit of damage. And obviously this encourages you to ram more to boot. So that's what the Goth clan's given us. And the Bad Moon clan, we get a shock attack mega cannon. So this is essentially a long range teleport that can be used while the shields are active. So yeah. Although it does come with 2 assault actions as opposed to the normal 1 for teleports. So not bad. Thief Surplus, good old handy, good old loved extra upgrade slot. You pretty much can't go wrong with that, because who doesn't want an extra upgrade? Right, so there's our Favours. Let's have a look at the crew available to us. So, if you've bought the upgrade, you will have a chain squig, and this is going to increase your morale, because pretty much anyone starts making noise, they get fed to the squig. That's more or less the principle here. So this does pretty much the same as the other races' morale officers. 10% per level of insubordination when the ship reaches 30%, 2% for line ship loss and 1% for escort ship loss. Just keep in mind though that while these pretty much eliminate the chance of insubordination in other races, Orks have a higher chance of insubordination, so this doesn't actually eliminate it completely, but it will take it to very low chances. Right, the Weird Boy. So remember, every point in this, if you've got the Weird Boy power upgrade, will also increase your range on that by 3,000, but what he actually does, regardless, is reduce your chance of being lost in the warp if you run. So it starts at 45%, 15% per level. You can have 3 levels, so you can eliminate it down to 0. Also reduces the delay of the warp disengagement. So you're trying to run, it's got a delay on it. During that time, if people board you, they can stop it. Well, also they might actually just blow you up. 2.5 seconds per level, so that's actually fairly decent. You pretty much halve it by the time you've got all 3 points in. Mech Boys. Yep, an extra 0.3 points per second per level for emergency repairs, so not quite an extra full point. Dakka Master, 25% increase to your critical chance of your weapons. Except for torps. So, yeah, just useful, really. Boys. Yeah, increases the troop value of your ship by 3 points per level. Mostly useful for defense, especially with Orks, but, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world to consider. Grots. Reduces the cooldown time of skills by 4% per level. I love this. I always, for every race, their version of this, I'm always going to put 3 points into it, because a 12% per cooldown time reduction on all your skills, just extremely useful. Right, Mad Flyer Boys. So obviously, if you've got squadrons on, so essentially 10% chance per level to avoid destruction. They've just got more of a chance of getting through. Which, if you're going with ordnance heavy, useful, because hopefully that means more get through and do damage. Right, so that's been the look at our upgrades, skills, favours and crew for Orks. So the next video for Orks, we will look at basic strategy and tactics. I hope you found this video useful, and I hope you join us in the future for the other videos. Thank you very much.